What is so hard about reading a science text? These days, there is the expectation that all students will read grade-level informational texts. When states began to work together to develop the Common Core standards, there was concern that students were not able to read complex science and social studies texts at grade level. There was a feeling that the reading material in schools had been dumbed down. This led to the development of English Language Arts Standard 10, which is about reading complex literary and informational works, including science texts. For us to be able to support our students in reading complex texts, we need to know what are the challenging linguistic features of science texts. In essence, we need to become language detectives. We are going to focus on 4 linguistic features of scientific texts. That is, number 1, technical vocabulary. Number 2, nominalization. That means when we use adjectives and verbs as nouns. Number 3, passive voice. And number 4, high-density clauses. Take a minute to read this passage on birdwatching. As you read, pick out any words that you consider technical vocabulary. You may have picked out ornithology, environment, migration, and reproductive. These are the most obvious technical science words. Notice how these words have prefixes and affixes, which is typical of science technical vocabulary. You probably did not pick out track. Track could be considered technical because it has a scientific use, like track behaviors, as well as non-scientific uses, like run around the track at school. When we speak of the technical nature of science vocabulary, we mean specialized words, a lot of process words, everyday words with specialized meanings, and words that tend to have obvious roots, prefixes, and suffixes. Science texts tend to use nominalization. That is when a verb or an adjective is turned into a noun. For example, distill becomes distillation. This makes text more complex simply because the words are longer. Also, nominalization makes the text sound more objective, which can be more challenging. The passive voice is also used in science texts as a way to make the text sound more objective. For example, we would say, "The electricity is carried by the wire cables," instead of "the wire cable carries the electricity." This makes it sound as if science is removed. It is happening out in the world. There are not actors or agents that are making it happen. Science texts also use high-density clauses or sentences with lots of words. Imagine how challenging it would be for a bilingual learner, or any learner, to read the displayed sentence. One of the tricks we are going to teach you is how to help students paraphrase sentences. So the texts are still complex, but the students are learning to unpack the language of the text. How can I connect to students' language and culture when we are caught up in this challenging grade-level English text? A few simple ideas. Is this the same or different than in your native language? Ask students to translate a piece of the text to see if this helps with meaning. It may or may not. Read a sentence in English, discuss it in the student's native language, report back in English. What other ideas come to mind? To summarize, you have been introduced to 4 linguistic features that are typical of scientific texts: technical vocabulary, nominalization, passive voice, and high-density clauses. Next, you will move on to the Make It Work section, where you will have 2 options to apply what you have learned about the linguistic features of science texts.